and thank you for joining today's webinar on maximising your farm's income with glamping accommodation. I'm Joby Mussell, Chief Commercial Officer of Travel Chapter, which includes glamping stays. And today we'll show you how diversifying into holiday accommodation can potentially unlock new revenue streams to your farming business. I'm joined by two industry experts today. So firstly, John Endicott, who is a partner at PKF Francis Clark accountancy firm and a leading tax expert in family business, private client and property matters. And secondly, I'm joined by Kerry Davis, who is a farmer and entrepreneur operating multiple cottages and glamping units and a mentor to farmers exploring diversification opportunities. So thank you both for joining today. Our panel will cover current market trends, practical steps to maximise profitability, and key tax considerations. You'll also hear firsthand from Kerry, who's already running a successful holiday let business, which also includes glamping accommodation. At the end of the presentations, there will be a Q&A section. Thank you to everyone who's already submitted questions in advance. If you would like to ask a question anytime during any of the presentations today, there should be a box on the left-hand side of the navigation panel which says, I think, ask questions. So feel free to drop those questions in and we will try and answer as many of those questions as we possibly can at the end. Okay, so in terms of the agenda today, I will kick off in a moment talking about some of the market trends and general outlook and some practical steps in terms of how to make a glamping business profitable. John will talk about the key kind of tax considerations and possible efficiencies available when setting up a glamping business. And Kerry will give real practical insights and best practice for running multiple holiday lets, which again includes glamping accommodation. So firstly, who are Travel Chapter? So Travel Chapter, we are a leading holiday letting agency. We've got over 40 offices right across the UK from England, Scotland and Wales. We have over 35 years experience in holiday letting industry. The actual business, which was founded in 1989, at that time it was known as Farm and Country Cottages, which later evolved into Holiday Cottages and Travel Chapter as the holding company. We're a portfolio of over 16,000 properties right across the UK, which includes over 1,200 glamping properties, and we have over 1,800 on working farms. We've got a unique network of lifestyle and regional brands. Probably the key ones relevant today are Glamping Stays, which is our dedicated glamping brand, and Holiday Lodges, which is our dedicated lodge brand. We are very proud to be the only holiday let agency, which is a platinum partner of GITA, which is the Glamping Industry Trade Association. And if you've not taken a look at that before, I would definitely signpost you to take a look. Our holiday letting support often starts very early stages. So if it's literally an idea at this stage, whether you're looking to convert barns, potentially looking at adding some pods or yurts or shepherd's huts to any land you may have on your farm, then we're always happy to help and come and give you the right advice. So in terms of our brand network, I've kind of touched on this briefly. So Holiday Cottages is our national brand. It's an aggregator where all of our properties and accommodation are aggregated. We then have a number of dedicated kind of specialist national brands. Canine Cottages, which caters, as you would expect, for dog-friendly holidays. Glamping Stays, which is our dedicated glamping brand. Farm Holidays for working farm holidays, and Holiday Lodges. And then we have a number of regional brands right across the UK. So top left, I won't go through all of them. Top left, you've got Holidays in the Cotswolds, which is centred around the Cotswolds. We've got a number of brands in the Lake District, Sally's Cottages, Lakeland Retreats, all the way through into Wales Cottage Holidays, Latitude 50 down in Cornwall, Dorset Coastal Cottages. So depending on where your property is located, you will get exposure across all of the relevant brands. So if your property, for example, was located in the Peak District, your property would go on to peakcottages.com, would also go on to Canine Cottages if you're willing to accept dogs, would go on to Glamping Stays if it's glamping accommodation, and of course go on to Holiday Cottages, giving you maximum exposure across multiple brands. And as mentioned, Glamping Stays is our dedicated glamping brand. We launched this middle of last year, so we've got a long history in terms of glamping accommodation. And prior to the launch, we had circa 1,000 different types of glamping units, from shepherd's huts to yurts to pods to safari tents, and really recognised there was growing demand for this market, which I will touch on a little bit later on. Hence why we decided to launch a dedicated brand for the market. So a little bit more about kind of who we are. We genuinely pride ourselves on trying to be a very responsible business, trying to give back to the local communities and environments that we operate in. And there's a number of charities that we do support. So the RSPB, we've been working with since 2020. And for every booking made, we pledge to restore 1 square metre of British woodland. And so far, we've restored over 1 million square metres. We also support the Marine Conservation Society, and we contribute to several collaborative UK-wide climate and ocean resilience projects. And the focus of these projects really is to recover and protect species and habitats that can deliver the fastest solutions to the climate and to the nature around us. We're a certified B Corp organisation. We were certified, I think, about 12 months ago now, where we really try to aim and balance profit with purpose, meeting high standard of social and both environmental responsibilities. And then finally, which is quite unique to us as a holiday let agency, we have a trust account for all bookings. And the purpose of this is to give financial security and transparency to both owners and to guests alike, having the funds in a secure trust account, which are then transferred to the actual owner after once the guests arrive. So it just gives both guests and owners peace of mind. So in terms of kind of drilling a little bit more specifically into glamping, and this is looking over the last kind of 12 months performance across all of our platforms. As I mentioned at the start, we have over 1,200 glamping units across our platforms. Over the last 12 months, we average 27 bookings per unit. It should say, so 1, 2, 4, 5. It should say hot tubs also make a big difference in terms of booking levels, and I'll come on to that in a little bit moment and give you some more detail. On average, just under 20,000 gross revenue per unit is generated from glamping accommodation, which equates to £722 on average per stay. And in terms of overall bookings across all of our platforms, it's in excess of 25,000. So I think the clear kind of highlight there is that there is lots of demand for glamping accommodation, and it's performing well across our platforms. And I guess to try and bring this to life a little bit, I've got 3 kind of case studies here. So the first one is Peregrine's Nook, which is in Wales in the Brecon Beacons. So this particular property joined us in 2024. It's a Sleeps 2 property, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, does accept dogs, 1 dog. It's situated on a working farm, obviously surrounded by lots of lovely countryside. It has a private wood-fired hot tub, and as quite a unique feature, has a wildflower covered roof. In the last 12 months, this particular property has generated 89 bookings and just over £42,000 in gross income. The Alpaca Retreat in the Cotswolds joined us in 2021. Again, another Sleeps 2, 1 bed, 1 bathroom, has a waterside location. It's actually a shepherd's hut, has a private deck with a hot tub, again in a very rural setting. Also has an outdoor kitchen with a barbecue area, and the added benefit of having alpacas on site, which the owners also allow guests to come and meet as well. So a nice experience there for people staying at this particular property. In terms of performance, it's generated 88 bookings and just under £44,000 in gross revenue. And then finally, Pheasant's Nook, which is in the Lake District, joined us in 2022. Again, a Sleeps 2, 1 bed, 1 bathroom, has an outdoor kitchen with barbecue and a pizza oven as well, with a fire pit and also a hot tub. So I think there's a common theme there, with all 3 of the individual properties having hot tubs, which really does kind of make a difference to the overall performance. This one also has a sauna and an outdoor cold shower, and in the last 12 months has generated 76 bookings and just over £44,000 in revenue. So I guess now looking at the wider market, some of the trends that we're seeing and what the general outlook is for glamping. So there are some headwinds, and I'll touch on that in a little bit in terms of some of the regulations within our market. But this particular market has seen continued growth for a number of years now, predating kind of COVID times. So predating COVID, growth from kind of 2018 was steady around kind of 3%. Coming out of COVID, there was a big surge, more investors coming into the market, both in terms of glamping accommodation and traditional holiday lets. And that saw a slight increase in terms of new supply and holiday lets coming into the market at around 4%. That's now kind of leveled off again to that kind of 3% mark. And we're expecting in terms of overall volumes of holiday lets in the market to increase to just over 200,000 by 2030. I should caveat that this is just in rural and coastal areas. This does not include urban accommodation. And I guess what are the key factors which are really driving this? So number one, holiday lets still remain a really attractive investment vehicle, which offer really strong returns on investment. Clearly having the right property in the right location will make a big difference to that. Continued growth in supply of speciality accommodation. So glamping is really playing a key part in that, where people are looking to, owners are looking to kind of diversify and generate additional income, particularly if they've got assets such as land. Private landlords switching from long-term letting into short-term holiday letting, which can offer superior yields. I think the one key factor there is making sure it's in a high-demand location where people do want to go on holiday. I think if that is the case, then typically holiday lets will generate a much better return than long-term lets. And I think then finally here, we're still seeing as a business travel chapter, really strong consumer demand for UK staycations. At the moment, travel chapter seeing booking performance up 5% year over year. So we're seeing more people looking to book and stay in our properties across our platforms. So drilling down a little bit further into glamping. So the glamping market is growing fast. Our estimate is there are around 5,000 glamping sites with 28,000 units in total. In terms of kind of the demand side, the UK glamping market in 2024 was worth between 170 and 180 million, and that's expected to grow by 2032 to around 350, 380 million. And I guess what's really kind of fueling that is the shift towards guests really wanting a unique experience, kind of getting back to nature and that ability to completely digitally detox. In terms of kind of searches online, on average, there are over 42,000 Google searches a month, specifically for the term glamping holidays, a real strong indicator that people are searching and wanting to stay in this types of accommodation. And the type of individuals wanting to stay in these properties are typically ABC1, socio-economic group, so which is kind of the mid-upper range in terms of types of guests that are wanting to stay in, as I said, in this type of accommodation. In terms of type of accommodation, you can see the bottom left chart. Shepherd's hut still remains the most common type of accommodation by tree houses, safari tents, and yurts and teepees. But as I said, Shepherd's huts certainly has the higher volume of accommodation. The other things which are really driving this is that guests are drawn to that Instagrammable experience. We have a dedicated Instagram page for glamping stays, and we have over 33,000 followers on there. And that's grown rapidly since we launched that last year. So we know it's really popular. Glamping also sits largely outside some of the holiday let regulations and changes to the FHL tax regime, which John may touch on a little bit later on. And positive macro narrative regarding broader economic and social benefits. I think a lot of noise in the press, certainly over the last kind of 12 to 24 months, where holiday lets are impacting housing certainly in some locations and impacting those local communities. Glamping sits outside of that. A pod, a shepherd's hut, a yurt, etc., isn't suitable accommodation for people to live in on a long-term basis. So some of the key changes to short-term let legislation. So I think it's probably worth saying to start off with that it's something which we do welcome, most of it, and see it as an opportunity to professionalise our sector, and also to make sure people are aware there's a clear distinction between holiday lets and actually second homes. So breaking this down country by country, in England, the government announced in February 2024 two changes to short-term lets in England. So firstly, the introduction of a statutory registration scheme, which is expected in late 2026. They are in testing stage at the moment, so this will be happening. And glamping will also be required. Owners of glamping units will be required to register for the scheme unless it's already on a licensed park. And secondly, the introduction of a new planning class for short-term let. So if people are wanting to switch from residential to holiday let, there was a consultation probably going back 18-24 months ago now to understand what the ramifications of that would be. But we've heard no more news from the government. So it's gone quiet over the last kind of 6 to 12 months. So we have no other kind of clear indication when that will happen and if that will happen. But there was a consultation kind of 12, 24 months ago. In Scotland, there is a short-term let licence scheme that required all short-term lets by January 2025 to have a licence in place. And I think that did cause quite a lot of disruption to the market in Scotland at the time, but that now seems to have settled down with a lot of the local authorities now being able to process those licences fairly quickly. And in Wales, so business rates, first of all, to qualify for business rates, a property must be available for 252 days a year and let for 182 days. That does differ from England and Wales. So in England and Wales, the property has to be available for 142 days and let for 70. And there's been a lot of lobbying mainly from the two kind of industry bodies for our sector, which is PASC and the STAA. And there was a new consultation last year. And we've recently heard that there potentially will be some changes to the 182 nights, which can be averaged over a 3-year period, plus also include 14 charity days. And that's likely to come into implementation from April 2027. A statutory registration licensing scheme. So we're likely to see this happening in Wales from autumn 2026. We haven't seen any specific dates on that yet. And a visitor levy in Wales. So the introduction of a new visitor levy, which essentially is a tourist tax, from April 2027, where the local authorities in Wales will be given the discretion whether they choose to apply it or not. From what we've been told, that would be around a £1.25 per person per night charge, which would also include children. Okay, so thinking about some practical steps. So how can you make your glamping business profitable? And I've detailed here some kind of key considerations when you want to start a glamping business. So whether you're early stages thinking about it right now, or whether you're an existing operator, hopefully there's a few kind of takeaways here for you. So I think firstly, planning permission. So it's highly likely that you will require planning permission, particularly if the actual glamping accommodation is fixed. So for example, it's not a tent, bell tent, safari tent, it's a shepherd's hut, it's a lodge. You require utilities, so water, electricity, then it's very likely that you will require planning permission. You need to consider building permits. So again, depending on what type of accommodation you're looking to add to your land, you need to think about building permits, fire safety requirements, and health department approvals, particularly if you're looking to serve food on site. You need to think about water supply, electricity supply, and waste systems, particularly obviously if it's in a piece of land where none of this exists right now. So you really need to think about the infrastructure around that. Access routes for visitors. I think this is really key. If you're looking to add glamping accommodation to a working farm, you may want to have different access for visitors to be able to get onto the site that won't cause any disruption to the day-to-day. Impact on the local community, mainly this is positive. If you have local tourist attractions, shops, restaurants, bars, by bringing people into the area, it can obviously help from an economic position in that particular local community. Consider if there's any financial grants available to support you. I'd definitely look to do some research in advance and see if there is anything to be able to support the startup of your business. Thinking about the revenue potential, think about the seasonality as well and the location. Certainly different types of glamping accommodation can be very seasonal. Again, using bell tents, safari tents. It's highly unlikely that people are probably going to want to stay in those in the depths of winter. But types of accommodation like shepherd's huts, pods, lodges can be very, very popular for winter stays, particularly if they have wood burners and hot tubs. What amenities are provided? I think this day and age, everyone expects Wi-Fi connectivity. Everyone expects clearly bathrooms, heating, fire pits, kitchens, hot tubs, etc. I think most people want the home comforts that they've got at home and expect that when they go on holiday as well. And any additional features said like hot tubs and saunas really does enhance the overall experience. Understand what your operating costs are. Particularly if it's a larger site, do you need to employ staff to be able to support that? That may be cleaning, maintenance, etc. What are the energy costs, cleaning and maintenance and the running of the site? All need to be factored in. Insurance, you will require different types of insurance. You need liability insurance, which obviously covers both the properties and the guests. And finally, thinking about pets. And I'll come on to the difference which pets can make in a moment, but pets are a key driver for bookings, but it needs to be considered, particularly if you're on a working farm. So what glamping accommodation can you provide on your land? So there are a few different types, which is worth considering. So I've detailed just a handful here. So cabins, pods, safari tents, yurts, shepherd huts, tree houses, airstreams. I think it really will depend on the location, the amount of land you've got available, how many units you're looking to add in total. But I think one of the beauties, certainly with glamping, you can start relatively small and then scale up. So if it's your first kind of venture, you might want to think about adding 1 or 2 pods or 1 or 2 shepherd's huts, depending on the success of that. And I think Kerry will share a little bit more insight around that a little bit later on. You can then look to scale and add to that if you're seeing really good returns. And some typical costs. Now, this is a range and it will depend really on the overall quality and finish. But typically a bell tent or a safari tent, the approximate cost would be around 3,000 to 10,000. Glamping pod, anything between 12,000 to 20,000. Shepherd's hut, anything from 20,000 to 40,000 pounds. And tree houses and luxury lodges can be anything from 50,000 all the way up to 150,000 if you're going to kind of the top end of the market. And one of the things that really kind of influences that investment and likely return. So offering short breaks, particularly this type of accommodation, short breaks are very popular. Over 60% of bookings for glamping accommodation is short breaks, so there's high demand for that. Pets, 40% of our bookings include a dog, so accepting pets can really increase that appeal to a wider audience. Enclosed gardens and space, people like to obviously have a private area for barbecues, for children as well, as obviously to the safety of having kids, and clearly for dogs as well. And the better the quality, the finish and furnishings will mean you can command a higher weekly price. And the expectations are increasing all the time. People want high standards of accommodation. Adding an open fire or wood burner can typically increase revenue on average by 9% and bookings by 5%, particularly when you're thinking about seasonality. It really does open that market for the winter months. Adding a hot tub can increase the weekly price by 31% and increase glamping bookings by 55%. And location. People like lake views, sea views, and can typically add 33% more to the overall bookings and 42% in terms of revenue. So you've now got your glamping pods, shepherd's huts, yurts in place. How are you going to now reach the right kind of market? And this is really, really key. So I think one of the first things is making sure you have a visually engaging website, which is really easy for for guests to be able to navigate, search, and book your property. Making sure you're visible across all of the kind of the key platforms, mainly Google, and you can do this in lots of different ways, YouTube. Having a social media presence is also really, really key. You know, as I mentioned before, this is a market which really appeals to people having that Instagrammable experience and being able to kind of share that experience with their friends and family. Leveraging booking platforms, so using online travel agents such as Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com. And finally, if that all sounds a lot, then work with a holiday letting agency that can do all of the marketing, the optimizing, the pricing, and attracting the right guests for you. So that's me finished. I'm now going to pass across to John, who's now going to touch on the tax considerations for holiday accommodation on farms. So over to you, John.
Joby, thanks for that. That was all excellent stuff. And yeah, in terms of where I tend to come in here, I've spent a long time with Pask and others and spent a great deal of time on the old kind of furnished holiday letting rules, and even written a book, 5 editions of it on that topic before those rules were abolished. And my firm has a very strong agricultural and farming team, act for a great number of farms, landed estates, long experience, the bulk of that in the southwest of England, but also into the south of England and the Midlands. So enough of marketing for that and a bit more of what you came for. So shall we move on to another slide, Joby? And if we flip on a slide. So I've got a couple of slides on tax. Not as pictorial as some as we've seen so far. I'm having a bit of envy here in terms of, but I'll try and make these exciting and interesting for you. So what things do you need to think about, and what's really the interesting points here? Now, there is a distinction in the tax system between whether you have trading income, which comes off kind of activities and things that you're actually doing, or rental income that's seen as passive income and much easier to generate and is therefore often taxed less generously. You get less reliefs, less favourable treatment. Now, going back into the midst of time, well, back into the 1970s anyway, and what happened with holiday accommodation was it was unclear where it sat between those two categories. And so what we had in the 1980s was some special holiday letting rules, which came up with a midway kind of rules in between those two. But sadly, in April last year, those special rules for income tax and capital gains tax got abolished. And we're now left in a position where you need to be one or the other, and the distinction between is not always straightforward. Now, one of the questions you need to ask yourself is, does that matter very much? And for many people, it won't matter too much. The 2 areas which are worth thinking about that in particular is what relief you get for capital expenditure. And in that respect, the glamping type units, the pods, or the other things we talk about can be particularly favourably treated. And I'll come on to more of that in a moment. And then the other one is what borrowing costs have you got involved? How much interest costs have you got? Because the way the rules work for rental income, you only get basic rate tax relief on interest costs if it's to do with rental income. Now, that may not be an issue if the incomes are only being taxed in the basic rate anyway. And there might also be ways of borrowing, let's say, within a main farming business and pulling the money out and investing into this business outside of it. So there are ways around that. And a lot of this comes down to the detail that's relevant to or the what you're trying to put together as your offering. And I'll come back to that in a bit in a moment. So the income tax needs thinking about, but in particular, it's about financing and it's about capital expenditure. And you need to get advice on that and make sure that you're not missing something. The other thing to think about in particular, and probably the starting point to think about, is VAT. And the issue here is that the customers can't recover the VAT. So if you have to charge VAT, which you will if the income goes over £90,000, then that's a direct cost on you. It's coming out of it. You're going to have to pay across more VAT than you're going to recover on input VAT that you can recover. So what that drives is certain structuring whereby if you've got relatively low levels of income, in other words, below the £90,000 registration limit, and you could move that to being, let's say, um, one spouse's income, let's say a farmer's wife's income, um, and therefore separate from a main VAT registration on the farm, then subject to some rules on business splitting that you just need to be slightly careful of, you could have that income coming in without having to have VAT applied to it. Whereas if it was in the main, let's say, farming partnership or main business, that might already be VAT registered. You'd have to deal with VAT. So really, the starting point is to make sure you think about VAT and structuring. And then the other key things to think about are borrowing and capital expenditure. Now, there are also capital gains tax issues and inheritance tax issues that could be relevant, and we might pick up on some of those. There might be questions coming in given recent changes. But for what we're talking about here, the main ones to focus on, as I say, is VAT and on capital expenditure and financing costs. Should we flip on a slide, please? Okay. So what should you think about? As I say, the most important starting point is VAT. Clearly, if you can, you want to get to a position where you don't have to deal with VAT on it. Now, clearly, if you're going to do this on a significant scale and you're going to go through the registration limit, then that's a pointless kind of one. You know, you're already planning to go through it and you need to factor that into your thinking. You could have things like using a separate limited company as a way of trying to keep some income down, but you're probably going to come up with you might come up with more costs than you want and more complications than you need to try and account for things to try and save some money. So as I say, some of this is about thinking who has the income and do they come within the existing VAT registration? So that needs thinking about. The next bit is it rental income or is it trading income? Now, if you've got an existing B&B activity, bed and breakfast, if you've got wedding, other venue, if you've got other things going on that causes you to have activities which gives a higher level of service to it, so we've got more chambermaiding, more food, more something else that's happening to pick it up, then you're likely to be able to get within trading income status. But it isn't easy to get within the trading income status position, and you might need to accept that it is rental income. And as I say, if it is rental income, given that we're talking about glamping units here, pods, all the other kind of alternative sources that we're putting within that structures, that may not be a big problem as long as you think about the financing. So this is possible to structure to get to the right kind of position. As I say, there may be reasons to use a separate limited company, but ignoring that and just assuming that one kept things more straightforward, it's mainly a case of trying to work out who operates which activity. Now, as I say, one of the most interesting kind of points and opportunities here, which is different from more common old-fashioned holiday lets, is the tax relief that you can get on the units themselves. Now, this is fact dependent and you need to get advice. And just picking up on one of the things that Joby's been stressing is he's used the word unique quite a bit and trying to get to more unique offerings. And that's key in terms of trying to get the business and what you're trying to sell. From a tax point of view, the word unique can make things more difficult at times because it's less obvious that you're within the general run of the mill that everyone else kind of has. So there are slightly complicated rules as to whether you're going to get tax relief on the initial capital expenditure on the units. And broadly, this comes down to whether they are buildings or not, and if there are structures, to what extent they're movable, are units plumbed in, electricity in some ways slightly less important. So to bring that to life a little bit more, if we think about some of the categories that have been talked about here, a slide or two back, we were talking about pods, shepherd's huts, tents, yurts, cabins, tree houses, airstreams. tents are the easiest. Tents are definitely not buildings. Tents are quite straightforward. You're all going to have stuff on there. You go to yurts, you go to some of the other ones here. When we get to more sophisticated structures that are heavily built in, then we could get to a different position and you may not get the same kind of relief. So as I say, there is a very big opportunity to get tax relief on the initial expenditure on the units you're putting in, but you need to think about those units. You need to think about where they fit in your kind of planning permission and the location, and you need to get tax advice alongside that kind of planning and design layout. And you need to think about your financing arrangements in order that you get relief for any financing costs or get the maximum tax relief on it. And with those thoughts, hopefully that was making some sense and I wasn't just confusing everyone at this time of night.
That's great. Thank you ever so much, John. And I do know there are some questions that have come in advance, so I will come back to you a little bit later on. I will now hand over to Kerry to share some of his kind of thoughts and insights on his glamping journey. Over to you, Kerry.
Thank you, Joby. Welcome, everybody. And I want to welcome onto our farm as well. We're a 300-acre organic farm with 4 generations. We're privileged to live in a beautiful place called Brecon Beacons, Banna Brycheiniog, newly named. We're also lucky for that because I think it's a tourism destination. And we're also a dark sky reserve as well, very little light pollution, and we're a Milky Way status. So people come to respect the value of the countryside and the rural nature of decluttering their lives. The tourism has become a major part of our business. It is a working farm. We have 50 cows that fatten cattle for Waitrose and 500 sheep that also fatten lambs for Waitrose and Marks and Spencers as well. We're lucky that my Julia, my wife and I, Julie, we have 3 children, and they're all part of the business in different guises. Heidi May, she's been pivotal really in pushing the tourism forward. She identified an income gap that the current business wasn't sort of driving forward, and she's focused. She's come back from London and focused her attention to be specifically running the tourism. We have 100-bed accommodation across the platform, so significant investment, and also in renewables. And my son has come home last year. He's been away for 8 years, and he's driving the farm forward as well. So I can't emphasize enough how important the tourism business has to create that sustainable nature of the next generation wanting to come back to farm with us. And it's been a fantastic journey, and we're really appreciative of the guests that come and stay with us. Do we want to go on to the next slide? Lovely. Specifically glamping. So we have 3 shepherd's huts in connection to the railway line. Really, these railway wagons came off the railway line when the railway line closed, coming through Cray, and that's what drove our sort of wish to become connected to the railway line that finished. So the three shepherd's huts have been extremely successful. We wanted to create the right quality right at the beginning. We were quite early adopters in the Brecon Beacons with this. The planning permission was quite an ordeal, but we do value that planning permission because it's quite difficult to get planning permission in the main. We do support that because we think it creates value. Otherwise, there'll be substandard competition possibly. So even though it's normally a sort of 4 to 6 month, it can even be longer process, and it is expensive. We think that creates an awful lot of value in protecting the quality of the offer in the area as well. With Travel Chapter have been pivotal really at exploring the options as we've grown with them. They've been key partners in trying to look at smart pricing. I think these 3 pods were the first back in the day to develop smart pricing. And when you're talking about reducing the price, it always seems foreign, but it comes with increased bookings. So when in August we charge more, in winter we charge less. It's quite obvious, but currently we weren't doing it. So that's made a massive difference to the booking. They've COVID, you could have sold these for 2 years without even blinking. The market dipped. It seemed as if the good days had gone. But the attention to detail, that's where it's at. It was clear today in your piece, really, Joby, that if you attention to detail, the market is still strong. And I think when I look at the customer base, I look at the stars in the skies, and the number of people who have never been to stay with us before is always amazes me. So yeah, there's a good, strong market out there. But my word of caution is don't try and undercut quality. Go the best you can. Next slide. Yeah. What are the key learnings? An authentic. I always try and engage with our guests. They love the fact that I'm always covered in muck and straw. They love the working farm. I always encourage them down the lambing shed this time of year. 2 days ago, we had 2 ladies finish their run, and they're both drawing and fostering lambs and crying with emotion. It's a very, very powerful tool. Some people might say they don't want them anywhere near the working farm, but we generally encourage them with the right precautions of washing your hands and pregnancy, obviously, this time of year. But we try to take them on tractor trailer lights. We are very much aware that we need to add value for the Balfour test. I think is the classic tax rule that most holiday lets need to try and achieve. It is a difficult thing to try. So we're aiming. We've got a wellbeing centre that we want to try and create a restaurant and add value to the stay. So we're very much aware that we probably aren't currently meeting that test, but over the next 5 years, we want to develop to make that test acid test that we can actually add value to their stays, not just initial booking. I think I want to just say about sustainability, about agriculture. For us to look after nature, if the business is under threat, it doesn't really worry about the environment. It's got to think about bottom line, and everything is under pressure, including ourselves. But with this level of profitability coming in as a diversification, it allows us to think a little bit more about the environment and take experiments with the environment, like adding value to clean drinking water and keeping bigger swards, trying to get more carbon in those soils. So I think it creates a really good, strong farm partnership. It really does. Next slide. Lovely. Challenges. I think the guests are really, their expectations increasing all the time. I remember when we first when we looked at this, we went to stay in the woods with no electric and compost loose, many, many yards of frozen plank across into the woods. And, we thought, wow, we loved the experience, but we thought, well, we probably need to make them en suite. We probably need to have electric in there. Recently, the Wi-Fi is everything. If there's no Wi-Fi, it's a catastrophe. But I do tell them, try and turn it off. You'll enjoy your stay more. But they really do need Wi-Fi. And I think, Heidi May's brought a new touch of adding guest experience, really. The welcome packs are significant. And I would just like to say about the hot tubs, they are definitely 30% of the bookings. But previously, we were wood-fired hot tubs. And I think people generally might not have an experience with lighting fires. They could turn up at 7 o'clock at night. It might be going dark, and it takes 3 hours to warm them up. And because we have so many, we can't pre-warm them up for them. So after switching to air source heat pumps and putting electric in there, that was definitely a major plus for the guest experience. Quick and at it. They want to get out, open the bottle of wine, flick the lid, and jump in. End of conversation. Whilst the wood one creates a nice, authentic approach to being carbon friendly, but really, these people aren't interested in lighting fires for 3 hours before they get in, Anything else you want to pick up on that? I think that you're right about the winter. It's easy to sell glamping, summer, spring, dead easy. You won't have to do it that well to create a decent income. But if you really want to hit in Wales the 182, you really got to be sharp at your game. And winter is where the profit is. So if you can make sure your winter destination is right and these places are warm, that will really add value to your profit line. It's about the shoulder seasons. Those Monday to Thursday slots is where the profit is, really. Next slide. I think sustainability, energy is a huge cost for us. We're probably in excess of £70,000 energy bills. We've spent about £250,000 on renewables. We have 100 kilowatts of solar, 80 kilowatts of battery, ground source heat pumps, 12 air source heat pumps on hot tubs. So we really have invested into reducing energy. We've got a long way to go. We see the day in the next 4 years, we may be off grid. We're pushing hard to looking at hydrogen. Can the farm produce hydrogen? We're in discussions with Scotland on that. We've got to get a hand on energy because the costs are ramping up. We've got a lovely Labour staff. We've got to look after those. There's no, when you've got a good member of staff, we absolutely look after them. It's quite difficult work because Mad Fridays are crazy. You have 100 beds to turn around. You've got 5 hours to do it. That needs to be looked at as well. How you look after your staff to retain them and encourage them to, be more like owners, if you like, so that they engage well with your members of the public. Make sure that they're always approachable. I think Heidi May's done an amazing job as travel chapter have with photography. You take a look at that photograph in the background. Photography is key. Make sure that you spend the right money at photography. It's key to, you've got one chance to sell your property. So visually excellent. We've put EV chargers in. We probably need to do more. That's coming to that. That's a little diversification actually. The EV chargers are quite profitable. So don't be afraid of putting them in. Otherwise the leads are coming out the back. They don't ask, they just take the electric. So get some grants to put some EV chargers in. And that's a second diversification in itself, I think. We've got about 6 or 7 of them, probably need a few more. Next slide. Just trying to think about, they just need to unwind. When they arrive, they've probably been on the road for 5 hours. They don't really want to engage much with people. Just settle them in and don't go at them with all sort of, you should try the waterfalls, you should go up in a van, or you need to try in a van. The next morning they wake up, they appreciate the comfy pillows and the lovely mattresses, and then they really want to engage in where they want to see, take time to meet them, take time to help them in their journey to understand what it is they can explore, and get them onto tractor and trailer as I do on the farm. Heidi May always shouting at me, you're going to have an insurance problem, but they do like it, and I enjoy spending time with them. They're an important part of our business. Dog friendly, absolutely. Wow, what a difference. No brainer. If you ain't taking dogs, you're not really running properly. That's a no brainer for us. Just making sure that the properties are up to standard, really. Within a minute they dip down, the paint has been marked as they walk in with their suitcases. So just keep at them. There's constant maintenance. I don't think we do some things as well as we could. I don't think we tell our sustainable story as well as we should. I don't think guests really, Clarkson Farm has shown us that, guests are really, really interested in our story. We don't tell it very well. So I think, we could take our hats off to that business and that way that he communicates and learn something from him. Good. Is that all? Is that the next one? Is that the last one?
I think that's all, Kerry. So thank you very much indeed for sharing those insights. Really, really helpful, particularly if you're just at the start of your journey in terms of setting up a glamping site. So I think just to conclude before we move into the Q&A session. So I think hopefully it's come through today. The glamping sector is a growing market. There's definitely strong consumer demand. If you get it right, as Kerry's just shared, there really are appealing profit margins, and it's a scalable business model, which truly does have a sustainability narrative to it as well. It's attracting investors, landowners, and obviously where you're looking to potentially diversify. And Kerry again has given a really good example of that from traditional farming. It really can generate good and high returns. We know that the demand is ever increasing. The financial climate can be challenging, but domestic holidays still remain really popular. And I think that's one thing lots of consumers won't compromise on. They might compromise on whether they go on that expensive overseas holiday, but consumers are still taking holidays, and UK staycations are ever popular. In terms of obviously the attractive potential returns, as I shared earlier, on average across all of our brands, it's just under £20,000 per unit per year. But the 3 examples I shared were double that. So depending on what features you put in, whether you put hot tubs in, whether you put wood burners in, saunas in, can really determine the actual return of that particular unit. And there are flexible setup options. So again, I touched on this earlier. You might not want to go kind of all in to start off with and put multiple units in. You can dip your toe in and put 1 or 2 units, shepherd's huts, pods, whatever that may well be, and then start to scale incrementally as you start to generate strong returns. So, but it's an opportunity which you can do that iteratively. You don't have to go all in from day one. And in terms of, I guess, how we can help, and I think this is not just unique to Travel Chapter and glamping stays. Any reputable holiday letting agency should be able to offer very similar services. As I mentioned right at the start, we're very well established. We've got over 35 years experience. We're very experienced in driving high booking volumes for our owners. Kerry touched on professional photography. We offer that as part of the service we provide to all of our owners. It's inclusive in the cost. We use an external company of actual professional photographers that will come out to capture your property or your glamping accommodation as best possible light. We do offer full property management. So if you want to be completely hands-off, you can hand us the keys and we can take care of the cleaning, the caretaking, the maintenance, the full works. Every single owner has a dedicated, what we call our homeowner account manager. You have one point of contact. That person will live locally to you, will come and visit you in person. Kerry touched on that slightly earlier on. So that makes things, the running of the business, much more smoother for you. We have a lot of local offices as well. We've got over 40 offices right across the UK. So more often than not, we've got an office close to where your properties or glamping site may well be located. Touched on all the various different brands that we have. Holiday Cottages, big national one, and Glamping Stays is obviously our dedicated brand. And the reach and marketing reach that comes with that. And so we are one of the only large, or one of the few large holiday letting agencies that has a dedicated glamping brand. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm now going to move into the Q&A session. So if you can just bear with me one moment, I'm going to change the view on the screen, and hopefully this works for us. Maybe not. I think we might have to stick with this view for the time being. Right, so lots of questions that have come in advance of the webinar today, and we've had some questions come during the course of the presentation as well. So thank you very much for that. So first question to come to Kerry, interesting one. What system of sewage do you use for your shepherd's huts?
That's an excellent question. Well, in Wales, it's been such a hot potato. The phosphates on the planning, it's been impossible for the last 2.5 years to get a toilet anywhere. So there has been a relaxation, and these were prior the latest round of NVZ rules, and NRW, our local regulator, they were very, very helpful. We rang them up and we asked for a permit, and they spent 20 minutes explaining us how to apply for a permit. So we had 3 licenses in an hour and a half, which was amazingly helpful. And with that, then we put a twin chamber graph tank in. So it's a split chamber and a soak away system, and that works incredibly effective. We get them professionally cleaned once a year, and we really have no issues with them whatsoever. And we've actually been using them for a trial with South Wales University to look at how we can possibly look at cartridges to help remove some of those phosphates. So they're actually part of a trial with some lovely lot of research, how we can start to remove to 100% removal using a cartridge with South Wales University. So yeah, good question. Well done.
Thanks, Kerry. So, question here for John. Can you clarify whether permanence of structure is more or less favourable to tax relief?
What you want is things to be more movable, less permanent. So the point here is that the more things are like buildings, the less favourable treatment they're going to get.
Okay, great. Question for myself, is the glamping market oversaturated? Hopefully that came through in the slides earlier on, that definitely consumer demand is continuing to increase. So I think some of the quick figures I quoted in 2024, the market was worth just under 180 million. And we're expecting that to grow to nearly 380 million by 2030. And in terms of number of searches, particularly through Google, it's averaging around 42,000 specifically for glamping holiday term. It's a strong indicator that lots of people are searching and wanting to book glamping holidays. Obviously, the supply into the market, I touched on the 5,000 sites across the UK and 28,000, I think, units in total. But certainly, there's plenty of demand for all of those individual sites and units. So, question for John, will the upcoming changes in inheritance tax affect the whole and mainly test in assessing a furnished holiday let as part of the farm business?
No, it's a simple, short answer to that. So the upcoming changes to inheritance tax are restricting the amount of the rate of relief of agricultural property relief or business property relief once you go above the £2.5 million threshold per individual. And there are also changes to assets within pension schemes coming up in April 2027. The issue here is whether your overall business qualifies for inheritance tax relief or not. Kerry was referring to this when he was talking about the Balfour test, which is a shorthand term that tends to be used in terms of it, and looking at whether you've got effectively a proportion of the activities more than 50% coming from what's considered trading activity. So what you are most likely to look at here, and the important point is, you may well be able to use some of this diversification to improve the overall position on your farm or in your business, but it comes down to a plan as to what's cost effective for you to do, and as to whether it's sensible to provide more services and how that's working. And that needs to fit into all the things that Joby's been talking about, and Kerry, about how your business functions and operates. So there are things about scale, about what services you want to provide, how you provide those services, how you can get it to work better. So it's quite a complex topic, and it needs consideration of your specific business with your advisors on the ground. The changes that the government is introducing do not change any of that analysis. It's the same analysis.
Okay.
Does that help, Joby?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Question for Kerry. What are the 3 most common mistakes people make when starting a glamping business?
Well, I think planning. I've done about 46 businesses for Welsh Government. And, the biggest one people underestimate is the planning. It is a nightmare. You've got to look at your access roads. Have you got appropriate access? Can you got visibility display on highway? Do you have control of both boundaries as you get onto the highway? That's a biggie. What impact you're going to have on your neighbours? Do you bring the planning permission at the right scale? Everybody says, "Oh, we'll put one and we'll add some more if it goes well." But of course, half of me thinks, well, perhaps we should ask for 3 and then see where the planners pull them back to. It's like, because you may have upset some locals by the busyness of your road, and it's very difficult to come back to it. That's a personal view. Energy, people got to look at how much power is coming out of their transformer. Very often they're only supplying the main farm, and the transformer needs to be upgraded. So your energy supplier needs to be contacted quite quickly and get a free valuation of where enough you're going to have power to drive these. They're quite hungry, energy hungry. Look at your overall energy strategy, and batteries and solar work so well. The third one, then, I would say customers, really. Just making sure that you're the type of farmer that is happy to engage with these people. It's quite foreign for some of these farmers to have, people walking onto their yard in their busy times. So what type of engagement do you want with those general public? And are you a person that would actively encourage them? They want to feel made at home there. That's my personal view. So yeah, those are the three things really.
That's great. Thanks, Kerry. Next question, which I think probably could be answered by myself and you, Kerry. So I'll answer it first and then I'll come to you to mix things up a little bit. So do you need to be on site 24/7 to manage holiday lets? I think from our perspective, the answer is no, as long as you're running a well-organized business that can mitigate any potential issues or problems. However, always plan for the unexpected, because you never know when you might have problems where Wi-Fi, electricity, whatever that may well be. But I think there's lots of things that you can do to mitigate that, making sure the changeovers are done when they should be done. You've got good quality linen and furnishings and fittings, etc. in the actual accommodation. That really does kind of mitigate it. But as I said, things do happen, so you have to kind of plan for the unexpected. You can obviously use a holiday letting agency that can obviously take care of all of that for you. But if you do choose to do it yourself, then I think in the main, no, you don't need to be on site 24/7, but things will crop up. Kerry, I don't know if you've got a slightly different take on it.
No, I agree with you. We have a toe in that water as well. So we have Neptune down in Saundersfoot, and that's actively managed. It's 2.5 hours away from an hour and a half away from us. So we don't go down to clean it, but it is more expensive. When you think about efficiencies of scale, running these things yourself, you can, the profit margins are eaten into if you are a hands-off person. And I actually think that the guests, it is a popular destination down by the beach. It works really, really well. But I would struggle to think if I set it up here that I missed that interaction with the farm and the family. They just love being part of the working farm. So it is possible to do both. It's more expensive to do it the other way, and you've got to have a really good offer to not have that personal interaction.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Kerry. Question for myself here. Is there any evidence that the 70 nights let to be eligible for business rates in Scotland will become 182 nights like in Wales? I think short answer to that is no. We haven't seen anything, certainly, coming out of the government to indicate that would be the case at all. Another question here.
Toby, could I
yes.
jump? Yeah. The only comment I'd add to that is that there was a business rates call for evidence in November last year that came out of the government, where the submission date's tomorrow. And there are some questions on that, and I know that you and others have been responding to them, and we've been responding there. That does still use the unhelpful language by the government of talking about second homes when they're talking about holiday accommodation. So there is a lack of, there's still a battle to be won with the government on some of the terminology coming out of official documents still. But so we will see where they get to.
Yeah, hopefully not. Question for Kerry. Are there grants to help fund the initial purchase of glamping units?
Yeah, I think if you look at your local council, there's a thing, in Wales, there's a thing called levelling up funds, and there's very often individual priorities. Powys will have some, Carmarthen will have some, and there's startup grants. There has been startup grants to initially sort of supercharge your business. So do get in touch with your local council and understand where this levelling up money is filtering to, and propose a case about supporting a startup business. In Wales, we have Farming Connect, so you can apply for 15 hours free mentoring to be able to guide you through the process. They apply the second time. I've been with some businesses for 3 years, helping them establish, so that's a really useful thing in Wales. And I do think that there's lots and lots of energy grants. We had a 70% renewable grant on some of the batteries and solars last year, and there's one at the moment as well, I think. So keep your eyes. These grants are popping up. They're very short windowed and a lot of work on applications. You'll probably have 3 in and you may be successful with 1. But yeah, they're worth putting your hand in, getting somebody looking at these grants, go to your council, ask them what's available, and put yourself on the right websites, because they are popping up.
That's great. Very helpful. Thanks, Kerry. Question for John. Most land is exempt from VAT unless an option to tax has been applied for. Therefore, rents will be exempt. Input costs will be subject to partial exemption rules. Is this correct?
Well, we're talking here about holiday accommodation income, and holiday accommodation income is standard rated. So, what's been said there is correct. Letting of land that doesn't constitute holiday accommodation is, so we're talking long-term letting, then that would be exempt income. And therefore, if you've got a mixture of that and you've got a mixture of standard rated income, you would then be getting into partial exemption positions, and you'd need to consider the partial exemption rules and try and work out. So kind of yes and no, but the key question here is we're dealing with standard rated income because it's holiday accommodation income.
That's great. Thanks, John. Question for myself. How would turning an on-farm cottage into a holiday let affect the council tax position? I guess first it would depend on which country you're in, whether you're England, Scotland or Wales, which will be kind of the starting point. And as I mentioned earlier on, in Wales, to qualify for business rates, the property needs to be available for 252 nights and let for 182 nights. And if you qualify for business rates, often this can mean that you can qualify for small business rates relief, which then means that there'll be no business rates to pay. If you don't achieve the right kind of thresholds, such as in England and Wales, which is 140 nights available and 70 nights let, then you will be subject to council tax. So we would always point owners in the direction to apply for business rates. You can do that via the valuation agency, valuation office agency, and there's a specific form on there for self-catering holiday property. So we would always signpost you in that direction. But as I said, thresholds do vary from country to country. And if you don't apply, you can't be exempt for those business rates, and you will be subject to council tax. Next question, which is for myself again. Where can I find out more on regulations, compliance, health and safety aspects around hot tubs and saunas? So I think there's quite a lot in that question. I think firstly, any reputable holiday let agency will be able to guide you through all of that. Not just ourselves, but most agencies would be able to kind of signpost you through what are all the compliance requirements when setting up, whether that's glamping accommodation or a traditional holiday let. Government websites, again, certainly around kind of regulations and compliance, are probably the obvious places to be able to go to get the information that you would require. I think that is all of the questions. So hopefully we've been able to answer. I think we've answered most of the questions which have come through. I'd just first like to thank both John and Kerry for joining me today. Hopefully everyone who's registered and attended today's event has been able to take away some really interesting insights from both of our speakers. From Travel Chapter's perspective, hopefully we've been able to share some really good kind of insights around the overall market and trends that we're starting to see develop. And I said, overall, I think we see this as absolutely a growing opportunity and a great investment vehicle if you are considering in terms of moving into the glamping world. So thank you for all attending. Hopefully, as I said, lots of information to take away today. And if you do have any further questions after today's event, we'll be sharing our contact details and you can reach out to us directly. So thank you very much indeed.
Okay. Bye, everybody.